You are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of In the Ladies Room with Dr. Donica. Now, we have had a lot of firsts in the Ladies Room, and today is our first guest to return for her third episode. Whether you've heard of her before or not, you are going to love Shannon Boodram. Now, she's widely known to many of you as Shan Boody. She's a certified sex educator, dating expert, and lifestyle personality. But we've had many firsts with Shan on this show. She was the first person to announce on our show that she was getting engaged. And our other big announcement is that since then, she's gotten married.
Yay!
We're also going to talk about her giving birth to her new book, which many authors have described as similar to pregnancy and delivery. As somebody who's done a book and pregnancy and delivery, I can say they are markedly different, but it is a birth in many respects. Anyway, more about Shan. She's a YouTube star related to all things sex positive, and relationships. As the host of Makeup or Breakup, a weekly Facebook Live series. She's the host of the full screen series, Your Perfect Date, where she serves as a coach to help individuals in need of dating advice. And I'm sure her book is going to get into a lot of that. She has been featured in numerous media outlets, including The View, MTV, Fox News, CNN, The New York Times, Forbes and Time Magazine. But her biggest claim to fame is that she has hit the big time by being one of our favorite guests in the ladies' room. Now, our previous episodes with Shan were about when a period becomes an exclamation point, where we talked about all kinds of period problems, including my favorite, crime scene periods. And then our previous episode prior to that was talking about a sex-positive education campaign called Keeping Her Awesome. Today, we're going to advance our conversation and talk about her new book, The Game of Desire: 5 Surprising Secrets to Dating with Dominance. And today, the first day this podcast is airing, is the launch of her book, so everybody can go out and get it. She's also the author of the book Laid: Young People's Experiences with Sex in an Easy Access Culture. And like my problem as a 50-something-year-old woman with today's culture is, shouldn't the dating book come before the Laid book? Anyway, please welcome Shan Boody back into the ladies' room.
Donica, that was the best intro I've ever heard. You get better each time. It's like having sex together, right? We just get to know each other a little bit more each round, and we get better at pleasing each other. And so I'm fully pleased today.
And like sex, it's about getting to know each other.
Yes.
One of the pieces of advice I gave my son when he went to college, like as he was walking out the door, I was stressing to think, what's my most important words of wisdom? And I said, don't have sex with psycho chicks. And I said, and you know how you get to know if they're psycho chicks? You get to know them first.
Yep. Did he keep that with him?
I'm sorry?
Did he keep that advice with him? Like, was that stuck in his head his entire college experience?
You're not going to believe this, but he hasn't discussed that with me in great detail. But from what I understand, he took that advice to heart from the women he's dated who I have met. Anyway, tell me about the book.
Honestly, it's such an incredible thing to hear someone say the book comes out today. It's just something that I have been working on for a very long time. I did a show maybe 4 years ago called Shan Boody is Your Perfect Date. And the premise of that show was, can someone be an expert dater? Just like someone is great at golf or incredible at cooking. Can someone be really good at dating? Because to your point, we don't get taught these things. Even sex education, which is so scarce, at least we have something. In terms of intimacy education, how to make connections with others, we literally have nothing. So my premise was, can someone be really good at this by understanding the laws of seduction, human nature, attraction, connection? And through doing that, I got a lot of feedback from people that was like, the tips are great, but we want to see it on different kinds of people. So the book, The Game of Desire, is my story of working with 6 women who are awesome, but chronically single. Like, they're that girlfriend in your group who you're like, I just don't understand why. Like, can't seem to pull it together in the love department. So I worked with these women for 6 months, and that is the story of the book, and the tips are interspersed throughout.
Awesome. It sounds like the real life version of the movie Hitch.
It is a lot like that, with a lot of like women in a group. So like a lot more like, unfortunately, but fortunately, the cattiness, some of the drama that we experience is being together, and of course the bonding moments. And so it's a really, really fascinating book. It's both a story and it's both self-help. So I think there's something in it for everyone.
So how did you come up with these women?
I interviewed 300 women in California. I just put out a call out on my social media for people who were desperate to try something radical and something new. And the program that I did with the women is radical. It starts off, the 5 surprising secrets, to spoiler alert, I guess, is number 1, to know. So you have to know yourself inside and out. And that included weeks, if not months actually, of like in-depth self-analysis. And then it's change. So once you know who you are, what are some of the things that you know you have to change about yourself? Specifically for people who are not getting the results they're looking for. Like, I think the problem in our society is that whenever someone is having trouble with love, the advice we give them is like, well, just be yourself. Well, like, when else would we give that advice, right? When else would that make sense?
It's not working.
Right. That's not,
But
and,
I think you may have to change who you're looking to attract.
Exactly.
It's part of the change process.
It's a massive part of the change process. Change where you're going to attract people. Change what you expect out of someone that you attract. So the change is a massive part of it. It's changing yourself, changing your environment, changing your expectations. And then it was learn. And so I got together over 10 experts ranging from a self-defense, 3 times black belt martial artist who taught them how to kick ass if it came down to it, especially in the Me Too era, to a stripper, to a psychologist who talked to them about how to avoid like catastrophic mistakes in relationships. We spoke to a phone sex operator about how to really tune your voice for the seduction that you're looking for. And so after that, we then went to practice, where we tested out some pretty radical hypotheses on how to make connections with others. Then the final phase was go out there and actually be the person that you want to be the person who gets the results they're looking for. And we had incredible results with the women. I was actually pretty amazed, because as you're going through a program, as you probably would know, it's just not very clean. It's not what you expect. You're not getting those like aha moments all the way through, but it really did click in the end, which I'm super proud of.
And what were the age range of the women?
They were 37 to 24. That was the age range of them.
So I did a previous podcast, as you know, with Sally Higginson, who's a columnist for the Chicago Tribune, called Losing Your Virginity After Divorce.
Yes.
We shared our experiences of dating after having been married for 20 to 25 years. And that was quite a journey. I had already finished my dating journey at that point and met my new life partner, but she hadn't. And it's very humorous. But it sounds like this is targeted to women who have never been married.
Yeah, I mean, most of the women who are in this, at the end of the day, these are universal tips. I will say that. Like, I think you have to make a decision just about the demographic that speaks to you the most. But at the end of the day, even my favorite thing to do, and we talked about this before, is that there's this generational divide when it comes to talking about sex even. Where in truth, an 18-year-old and a 60-year-old probably have a lot in common. They're going through changes in their bodies, right? Like, things don't feel like they used to feel. What's up is down, what's down is up. Like, they're getting to know themselves again and having to throw themselves into the deep end. And so there's a lot more that we have in common than differences. And so I think that this book is for silver seekers. I absolutely think that the same tips apply. And you're right, there's a massive demographic of people who are re-entering the dating pool who do need to understand, like, okay, like, how do I market myself? How do I present myself? What am I looking? How do I approach this really important area of my life with a strategy? Like, if I told you something was going to account for 2/3 of your overall happiness, how much effort would you put into understanding that thing in and out? But yet when it comes to love, we're just like, trial by error, go out there and see what happens. And as people who are older know, sometimes when you see what happens, it doesn't really work out that great.
So you talk about this as the game of desire. And so just even with that part of the title, I have so many questions. First of all, why did you call it the game?
I think it's fun. I think when you know what you're doing with something, there's a sense of joy, there's a playfulness to it. I think people approach dating in 2019 with a dread I think we hear so much negativity about making connections with others. And when you're good at connecting with people, I can't promise you you're going to meet your soulmate or your life partner, because there's just a certain je ne sais quoi. There's a click, there's a chemistry that has to happen. But you can be damn good at making connections. You can be damn good at flirting and seducing. And so for that reason, you should always find joy in the experience of getting to know others. And so I just really wanted to emphasize.
That was one of the things I said about my dating experience, was every date was either a good experience or a good story.
Yes, that's the spirit.
So when we talk about desire, though, we usually think about sex, and it sounds like you're talking about specifically the desire for a relationship. And of course, like many words in the English language, they have multiple meanings. But desire is a pretty loaded term. So with these women, did you separate out the difference between looking for somebody to hook up with on Saturday night versus looking for somebody to be in a long-term relationship with, which sometimes is the same, not always?
I love that question, Donica. Desire for me just means feeling desired. Doesn't even have to go anywhere. I actually got that inspiration from, I did a podcast with CBC maybe like a year ago. And again, it was a multi-generational sex talk. And there was an 18-year-old, like I said, and like an 80-year-old in my sex talk class. And the 80-year-old and the 18-year-old, the word desire just kept coming up. The one who was older was like, I just haven't felt desired in a long time. I haven't felt like somebody wants me in that way. And the 18-year-old was like, I don't know if I'm desirable. I don't know if, like, how do I get desire from people? And so the word desire, I think, just means like giving yourself permission to be wanted, feeling like you're wanted by others. And where that goes from there, if it goes to a one-night stand or it goes to marriage, it's up to you. But I just want people to feel like, yo, I am sexy, I am powerful, I'm great at making connections, I can go out there and be in the driver's seat of my love life, and this shit is fun. Like, that's what I mean when I say desire.
So that's very interesting, because I interpret desire the exact opposite way. You're focusing on being desired or feeling desirable. When I think about desire, I think about my interest in someone else, or my level of libido, or my level of sexual engagement. And one of the lines I actually was most proud of that I put in my Match.com profile, which fun fact, that's how I met my life partner, was Match.com. Free plug for them. One of my favorite lines in my own profile that I came up with was, I wanted to be desired by a man I found desirable. And one of my frustrations in dating again, after having been married for so long, was feeling like I desired someone else. I didn't have any problem feeling like there were people who desired me, but it was feeling like I desired the same person who desired me. So where does that play out?
I mean, that probably speaks to the work that you've done, Donica, right? Like the work that you have done to know yourself inside and out, to accept yourself as a sexual person, to be proud in that space, to be proud of being a mother. Like, so many people, to get to that space where they're like, nah, I'm the shit, I'm great, I'm amazing. Not just saying that, they've actually put the work in, right? Like, they've done the therapy, or they've done the talking, those intimate conversations with friends and family. They've put the work in to get to a space where they can confidently say, like, I'm a great catch. So for a lot of people, that's not square one. I mean, I think a lot of times I was watching, are you familiar with Dr. Chris Donahue?
No, educate me.
He's another sex educator, but he was saying, like, I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say, you know, games in relationship and strategies and dating. Like, you just have to show up and be yourself. Yeah. And I was like, that's a great point for a hot, white doctor male to make, who is tattooed and has probably had the benefit of talking to tons of people, speaking in audiences, getting praise. Like, the place that he has, his entry point to dating is so different than a woman who's never felt like she was a catch, who maybe came from an abusive family, or perhaps became a mother very young and lost her juge. Like, that entry point of getting to that space where you were, where you're like, I want to see who I like. I mean, that's just not square one for a lot of people out there. And that's really who the book is for.
Yeah, and I think square one really does begin with doing the homework. As you said, the number one piece of advice I like to give anybody entering a relationship is definitely think about, what do you want? And who do you want? And even for those of us who know we're awesome, present company, of course, on the top of the list, we're not awesome for everybody. It's
Yes.
like finding a job. It's like finding a career. It's like finding a hobby or a passion. It has to be a good fit. So you have to find somebody who is a fit for what you want and what you need, as well as who and what you might be attracted to. And many times, and so what I tell women to always do first is make their list of deal breakers.
Yes.
So talk to me about deal breakers and how you advise women about that.
So in the book, once people do, so I have a free workbook online actually,
Wow.
which is a series of my favorite quizzes and assessments, from attachment theory to love languages, apology languages, turn on triggers, orgasm recipe, Big 5 personality assessment. It takes 2 hours, but it's a really great way to get to know yourself and then also learn the language to describe that self to others. And so if you go to thegameofdesire.com/workbook, you can complete that.
thegameofdesire.com/workbook. I know everybody wants to get this, especially people who are already in a relationship. I mean, that's a whole nother
girl. Yes, 100%.
People who need to rekindle that sense of desire and that sense of connectedness with their partner, because maybe they didn't do this in the beginning. And maybe
100%.
Are we staying and fixing and repairing and building, or are we checking out?
That's such an incredible point. I never even thought about that. So thank you for adding that in. Yeah, there we go. An extra market you just opened up for me. But once people do the workbook and then they start to address some of the things that they want to change, and now they're in a position to say, here's who I am, who am I looking for? I had them create a job listing, which was, to your point, like really similar. You have to be clear. What am I looking for? Is it a one-night stand? Is it a financial sponsor? Is it a lifelong partner? Like, what am I really looking for? What are the key things, the main qualifications this person has to have? What are the do not applies? And do not applies, of course, translate to deal breakers. What are some of the things you can be flexible on? How far does this person have to live? Like, when you really write it out and you can see clearly, like, it is, like you said, like it's a job. Like, you're looking to bring someone on to your multi-billion-dollar company. And if you're trying to bring somebody into the executive suite, you got to make sure that you do your vetting work. Not to say that you ever share this publicly and, like, cross-check somebody with it, but just for internal purposes only. I think it's really important to clarify what we want, what we don't want, and how far we're willing to go to get it.
So I think that whole process is one of the things that I think is a really positive thing about online dating apps, if you do it properly. As opposed to when I was dating the first time around and cell phones weren't even a thing. So, when I was dating the first time around, the only way to meet people was to actually meet people.
Yes.
Unless you were set up on a blind date. And even then, that meant you had to be set up on a blind date and actually meet people. I think now you can do a lot of pre-work that can really screen the process. But one of the things that I know you talk about in your book are sort of the downsides of dating apps and where they have gotten us and how they have affected our culture. So go.
It's like, it's like a NASCAR. It goes 500 miles per hour. The engine revs, it's crazy. It's got 6,000 horsepower. Clearly I don't know about cars, but it's a really great car. It's a fantastic car, and yet people don't know how to drive. So what we've done with our society is we've continued to increase the vehicle, the tool, its capacity to perform, and we haven't given people the basics on how to turn their car on. So if you're somebody who has never done, like, to me, dating apps are for pros, right? Like, when you've gotten so good at vetting, understanding yourself, knowing what you're looking for, when you know how to avoid dater burnout, when you know how to connect with people, that's when dating apps really do shine. But when you're just learning how to drive, it's very easy. You're going to get in, turn that thing on, and crash and burn because it's just way too powerful. But I think they can be great in the tools of an experienced individual like yourself. Like, what was your dating app process that led you to your life partner now?
So the best advice I had gotten, and I was a reluctant entry into the dating app world because, that was so foreign to me. And when I started dating again, I had not been on a date in 24 years. So that's like the Hitch 2.0 movie.
Yes.
So I was encouraged by friends of mine who had done it. So I asked people their advice about how does this work? I also had a period where I was actually recovering from surgery. So while I was recovering from surgery, I perused all these apps, but didn't really use any of them, and settled on Match.com as the most appropriate one for me and my age group and my geographic location, etc. But what I realized was, and the best advice I had gotten was, write your profile as though you're writing to the person you want to attract. And what I also did is, you don't write your profile once. Just like you don't determine one time when you're 17 what Prince Charming looks like.
Or you don't do one resume, you update it accordingly.
You have to tweak it based on who you're talking to, based on your experience. And every time I interacted with somebody online, I changed something in my profile, for better or for worse. And I realized that making it very clear what I was not interested in was a really good way to weed people out. I think when people are so eager to meet someone, they are too quick to drop some of their screening criteria. So let's take one for me. And this really makes you address your biases too. So one for me that was very easy was, I don't want to date somebody who's a smoker. It's just not my thing, and it's a really easy way to, rule somebody out. I also didn't want to date somebody who lived more than 30 minutes away from me.
Yep.
Been there, done that, too difficult, didn't work. And I got a scathing email from somebody in 4 states away who, I responded to very nicely, sorry, not interested in a long distance relationship with somebody I haven't even met yet. And he just, wrote this scathing response to me. That's an immediate block. On any social media, whether you're dating or not, that's an immediate block. But I think that it's very important to really figure out for yourself in your own mind what you're interested in and what you're not. I think a lot of times these apps are very misused by people who are just lonely.
Yeah.
Are willing to accept anything, and that takes you down the wrong path. So tell us some of the surprising things you learned in the process of doing the research for this book.
Oh my God, a billion surprising. I mean, in the realm of dating apps, we spoke with OkCupid CMO and the league, also like their marketing director. And so they were telling us things like what certain colors, like bright colors versus any kind of pattern, definitely makes someone pop. By you getting more exposure on the app, responding back to messages is massively important. Like the algorithm really favors people who interact with people, for better or worse. Even if you wrote that guy back and said like, hey, no thanks, goodbye, like you're now going to start to get placed in front of more people. Like they want to promote their most responsive users. One of the other great things that we learned is that, again, like she gave this great tip of dating apps are like a book. It's like write well and edit often. And she's like, the more that you edit your app, the actually more that you tell the algorithm to prioritize this person, because they are making those adjustments and changes. And so those small things that you're doing not only are improving your filtration process, they're also improving your ELO score or your visibility on the apps themselves. So she was like, the whole thing is to get your dating apps to work hard for you and not the other way around. And she gave us an incredible like library of tips that you can use in order to game the gaming system. But yeah, there was like every expert that we brought in taught me something new. The biggest educator of all, obviously, was the women in the group. I really thought that I knew what I was doing, and midway through, I'm like, oh, I actually have no idea. And so there was so much troubleshooting and figuring it out. And I made all these assumptions based on how I had learned in the past, right? Like my learning curve may have been quicker, but I had also had 10 years of experience beforehand. I also had the beneficiary of people like yourself who are in my life, who I get to learn from. And so these women who maybe have...
And for the benefit of people who are listening to this as a podcast, as opposed to watching this as a video, you also have the benefit, which you have to admit, of being drop dead gorgeous and, phenomenally attractive, both physically and in terms of having an incredibly outgoing, engaging personality.
I mean, thank you. First of all, once again, our love is blossoming. But absolutely, yes, I did have to acknowledge that bias that was happening. And so for them who never thought of themselves as attractive, have never counted themselves in as being charismatic, their learning curve was so much slower than I anticipated. I originally started this book, this is going to sound so stupid. When I started the process of working with these women, I'm like, this is a 6-week course. 8 months later, and I'm still working with these women. You know what I mean? Like, it's still an ongoing process of helping them. But when we look back, we did this incredible before and after video, which I'm going to send to you, where I took their very first entry video to me, and then where they're at now. It's like mind blowing. But the process was definitely not 6 weeks, and so that was the greatest humble educator that I could possibly receive.
So let's get back to this issue. I'm fascinated with this, certainly as a parent, but also as a doctor, and also as a woman who has an army of girlfriends. And what I see with women who are in the dating force now, regardless of their age, is this issue of not having learned how to date, not having learned how to develop a relationship, not having learned the language of love or the language of seduction, or even how to treat somebody who you might be attracted to. And very often, as women, we get in this very defensive posturing about what he is doing to me, or what the other person is doing to me, not necessarily a he, what they're doing to me, as opposed to what am I throwing out into the universe, and how am I treating them, or how am I initiating contact. So I love the subtitle of your book, when you talk about dating with dominance. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's 100% put yourself in the driver's seat, right? The driver gets to decide where you're going. The driver decides how fast you're going. I think a lot of women are waiting in a tower still, or sitting in the passenger seat. Like, right. Even in terms of
farming to climb up the tower.
Even in the whole notion of like women shouldn't make the first move. It's like, that's shit. Why would you want to be in a position where you're not in control of who you get to connect with? Why would you want to take a passive approach to your lifelong partner potential? Like, if I see somebody that I think I could make a connection with, why would I want to count myself out and say, well, I can't talk to them unless they talk to me? And one of the greatest things that we did, we went to, are you familiar with pickup artistry?
No.
So pickup artistry is an entire industry that teaches men who don't know how to interact with women how to do that. There's a darker part to that, because to me, what they're really doing is putting a Band-Aid on top of a problem. They're taking men who are socially awkward, don't know how to socialize with women, and teaching them psychological techniques to make it happen. And I mean, make it happen by hopefully have sex with that person. There's an altruistic component to that, which I like, which I think my book has, wherein that not everybody has it figured out. Not everybody is that suave, like, hey, knows how to work a party. And so for that person, you do need some kind of instruction. But the instruction has to start. Pardon?
And not everybody's attracted to that.
Exactly. But it's also you got to have something that you can lean on. Like, what I love about the book, The Art of Seduction, which I bring up a lot in my book, is that there's 9 different ways to seduce. Some of us think of seduction as either like the hey, suave guy, or the drop dead gorgeous, person who walks in the room and takes our breath away. But there's also the tease. There's also the person who looks you in the eye and speaks to you for your highest potential. There's the person who reminds you of like a childlike, carefree nature. Like, there's 9 different ways that you can be that person who's just so magnetic, and looks and charisma are just 2 of 9 of those ways. But the coach for that, JT Tran, he said to us that the men that he works with are so terrified of approaching women. He had a Navy SEAL in one of his courses, and the Navy SEAL said to him, I've ran into enemy fire before, and that was less scary to me than approaching a woman.
Okay, that's because he was trained to run into enemy fire.
Exactly.
And he had a lot of experience. But also, all those years that he was running into enemy fire, or he was, in the Navy SEALs, he wasn't interacting with women. He was,
right,
for the most, not even as colleagues or just casual interactions, because it's a very male-dominated field. We see this a lot in medicine, where doctors in training or in residency are so consumed with their work schedule that they really have no time or energy for anything outside of that. They just want to go to sleep, or they want to go to bed, but they want to go to sleep, not to go to bed with anybody else. But that gets back to your car analogy that I loved, and I'm not a big car person either. But what I know about cars is that there are gorgeous brand new cars out there, but if they don't have any gas, they're not going to go.
Love that.
And I see the desire as the gas.
Mm-hmm.
The desire And I was thinking about this word mojo. You know, the desire is your mojo. And we all kind of know what mojo is, but I don't really know what the definition of mojo is. But that's what I see as your desire. And I actually tried to look up mojo and see where did that term even come from. And I don't know. I don't know if you know. But that's
I'm going to guess Austin Powers, but I think that's probably wrong.
So I don't know where that came from, but I think we all recognize that's what motivates you. That's what gets you going. That's your personal power. That's your desire, but also that's what other people recognize as being desirable.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a great analogy to put it. And it is just, it's a lot of it is just practice. A lot of it is less something you're either born with or you're not. People think of mojo as like either you got the juice or you don't. Nah, you can work for the juice. You can actually go buy the juice. You can research how to get the juice. Like that isn't just because you don't naturally exude that thing doesn't mean that you're a lost cause. Like there are strategies in place. There are ways you can get better. You know, so that I think should be encouraging to people to say like, yes, like find your mojo. And if you don't have it within you, go out there and get it for yourself because there's definitely tools that will help you.
I think one of the things that I find, and I'm curious to hear your comment on this, is this concept of, you know, you talked about those women in our friend group who just seem to be like chronically frustrated with their social life and their dating life and their ability to attract people who they're interested in attracting. And we have this concept in medicine, we talk about the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So you mentioned earlier at the outset that your number one thing was helping these women identify what they needed to change. And that is probably the hardest thing that we can advise our friends or our patients or our clients in any aspect is saying, okay, yes, there's lots of institutional things about the world and social factors that need to change. But what do you need to change? How did you get people to even deal with that question and address that question?
Donica, girl, this was the struggle. When I say 6 months, this was 4 of them. We did so many activities. We started off with the self-summary workbook. And through that, you could see that people could identify what their faults were, but only in relation to who had hurt them. So if they said, I've become really stubborn and aggressive because of the fact that my ex was this and my ex, and so the attention wasn't on the stubborn and aggressiveness, their attention was on the ex that created this reactionary persona to them. Or one of the girls, she was just so unwilling to try. Like she just never participated, never raised her hand. Just she came in the group, so there was some willingness, but like when she was there, she was just like a flower on the wall. She just did nothing. But her whole thing was, well, my mom has consistently told me I'm not good enough. Like, okay, well, we identified why this is this way, but like, are you going to talk about the fact that this is hurting you? So we did that activity. Then I had them go and interview one of their exes to be like, okay, this is not a conversation closure. You know, this is not a conversation. Well, you got to pick the right ex. You know, you really have to choose one that during the relationship, this ex had an invested interest in your growth, 1, or 2, like your health. So you don't pick the ex who's like the worst and who was bad in the relationship because they're going to be bad out of the relationship. But we all may have had a partner who it's like, it was the right person, but the wrong time. Maybe it was the right kind of person, but the wrong match. So those were the exes I told them to go back and talk to and ask like, hey, be honest, like, where did I come up short in this connection? And even after we did that, it didn't sink in. Then we had to go through anti-seductive behaviors. So we learned and researched about seductiveness and anti-seductive.
Interrupt you for a second about where did I come up short in this relationship. I have to put a plug in for the fact that many times relationships don't work, and it's not because either person came up short. It's just because you weren't the right fit. And yes. I think that people need to focus on that, because I think especially when somebody is eager to be in a relationship, then if they are in a relationship, they like to focus just on the good things and the positive benefits, and they overlook a lot of the things that are not meeting their needs, or a lot of things where they're not meeting the other person's needs, but it just may not be a good fit. And if we talk about something totally impersonal, it could be the example I gave earlier about you live, they're geographically undesirable. You know, that's nobody's fault.
Well, that might be why ultimately the relationship didn't work. That doesn't mean that there weren't things along the way that were evident that you have to work on. So for example, I'm not good at math. If you put me in an accounting position, I'd probably have to quit, not because of me or accounting being shit, just because like we're not the right fit. But you might also notice as an employee, like, hey, you never showed up for work on time, which is a problem of mine. Hey, you tended to really not do well when people gave you critique. You got really defensive. So it wasn't about like taking on the blame for the relationship at fault, but this is just somebody who you were intimately connected with, who knew you kind of warts and all, who had an opportunity to see you in various different environments as you are. And so that person is going to have, don't get me wrong, your friends and family know what's wrong with you too. Elaine de Botton, which is like a philosopher I love, he has an incredible talk on this. Like, most people know why you're blocking your own blessings, but your friends and family aren't going to tell you because they're still going to hang out with you. Or because they're like, well, that's just Shan, that's just the way that she is. And they don't have to sleep with me. You know what I mean? There's a million different reasons. Like,
they don't sleep with you. They don't have to have breakfast with you every day. Exactly. They don't have to get bed with you every night. You know, it's not, and they're willing to accept more things because they see a different benefit.
And it's not really their, I have so many friends who I know exactly what their problem is, but they've never asked me, so I'm not going to volunteer it. And two, I ain't got to live with them. So I'm like, someone else's mess to clean up. You know, if they came to me and said genuinely, like, you know, what do I have to work on? And so that's what this conversation was about. It was just like, what do you think I have to work on in order to put myself in a position to find the kind of relationship that I would thrive in? And even after they did that, there was still really not that click. And then, but it was, I had these one-on-one calls with each woman, but I was armed with both the workbook and the exercise. So I got to really be like, look, there's no denying this is something you have to work on. And that's when I think things started to click for them.
Was there ever a time where you felt with one or more of these women that you had to say to them, as I have had to say to friends who I've had these conversations with or patients, you need therapy? You know, let me refer you to a really good therapist?
Yes and no. I would say with this group in particular, like I interviewed 300 women, and the main thing I was looking for is that this, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, finding an intimate partnership has to be like really what your primary issue is. If I met somebody who I felt needed therapy, one of the girls in the group, for example, suffers from anxiety, and she was seeing a therapist for her anxiety. So I tried my best, because I would never ask a person who has real psychological issues or trauma that they still haven't overcome to start like focusing on like, let's see if you can attract some boys. You know, that's just not the priority list that I would probably put that on. So the women in my group in particular, I don't think that they're a place where they needed, everyone should go to therapy. But I don't think they were in a place where like that was so pervasive for them that was stopping them from making connections. It was more so about recognizing things in themselves and also stepping into their right to be desired.
So when you think about somebody's right, feeling that they have a right to be desired, I actually, just to go on a tangent for a sec, I remember reading this article recently that, you know, went viral about a woman who was married to a guy who was gay, but they were Mormons. And so they felt that they could still they were best friends. They felt they could have a real relationship. 5 years later, they admitted, okay, this isn't working. He needs to be who he is, and he needs to. But what she said that really struck me about on the topic of desire, they had been high school sweethearts. And she said, I never had the experience where I felt like he was looking at me with desire. And it just hit me like this overwhelming sadness that there are people who have never had that experience of being looked at by somebody they might be attracted to or in a relationship with just absolute desire.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunate, but I mean, that's the reality of people who are not in a relationship where the sexual orientations don't match up, right? A lot of us, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think
the level of attractiveness doesn't match up, or the level of desire doesn't match up. I have friends who are in, you know, there's this new thing that sex therapists have been talking about, and by new, I mean like in the last 15 years, called the sexless marriage.
Yes.
People who are married but have sex fewer than 10 times a year. And, you know, when I started reading about this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was a thing. And I started talking to my various friends and contacts about it, and I found out it was a much bigger thing than I had previously been aware of.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the thing is like, you don't have to have the dream job in order to enjoy your life, right? You don't have to have the perfect family in order to love your family. You don't have to have a relationship that's got mutuality, desire, partnership, equality, and self-celebration in order to live a happy, content life. And so I do think you can be in a sexless marriage and have desire and still be okay with that. It can still function for you and support the kind of life that you've accepted. This book in particular, The Game of Desire, is not for that. It's for the person who's like, I want the absolute best that I possibly can get out of love. I want to feel desired. I want to choose the person who makes me feel on fire. The real thing, I think the prize in relationships isn't finding the perfect partner. It's finding the person who makes you fall in love with yourself. Like when you're around this person, you feel sexy, funny, cool, smart, inspired. You feel like a kick-ass parent. You just feel like, oh my God, like I am awesome.
Like
I think that
back.
You got, yes. Yeah, I feel like the partner element of it is like kind of secondary. They have to be great, of course, but what I really want these women to do, especially at this stage in where they were, was to find a partner that made them fall in love with themselves. And so, yeah, you do need a partner who gives you that look in order to get that connection. But it doesn't mean that without that look, you can't still experience some form of a connection.
So my father was no great relationship expert, but one of the things he said to me when I was dating the first time around, when I was still a teenager, and I thought I was in love for the first time, he said to me, being in love with somebody is not just about how you feel about them. It's how you feel about yourself because you happen to be with them.
Yes, Dad.
And I thought that, and I tell that to my kids, I tell that to anybody who will listen. That I think is really, really important. And
how does your partner make you feel about yourself?
Awesome. And one of the things that he said to me in the very beginning of our relationship, which really struck me as interesting because I hadn't ever thought about it before. And I think one of the things that's an issue for women, especially of my age generation, who are professionals, who were trailblazers, who were the only women in the room, or the first women in, to be hired in whatever XYZ job, was that we felt that we were considered intimidating to men. And we were often told, you're overpowering or you're too much. And what he told me, which I thought was just so awesome, is that the number one feature he thought was attractive in a woman was self-confidence. And that's just one of the many, many reasons I love him. But I think that's another thing that a lot of women are afraid of, is appearing as though there's such a thing as too self-confident or appealing to confident. And that's what I love about your dating with dominance phrase in the subtitle of your book. Dominance can also be misinterpreted.
Yes.
But I think maybe I would, if I was your editor, maybe I would have said dating with confidence.
Oh, yes. Confidence, such a great word.
So how would you rate the self-confidence of the women who were in your group before and after?
I'd say before, I mean, this is the thing. I'm going to just say the corniest thing ever. It's like 2 to 9. I think coming into it, it was just like one of the women, she just really started out being like, it's just really even hard for me to even fathom someone wanting me for the right ways. One of the women, she identified as a queer woman, but had never had the courage or confidence to enter the queer community because she felt like she'd be rejected and that would be traumatizing. There was one woman whom she'd identified who her crush was and seen him all the time, but just never felt like she had enough to say or enough to contribute to even speak to them. And in the end, that ended up being the person that she now engaged with. So I feel like it was just a systematic process of getting to know themselves, accepting themselves, feel like they're in control of changing the things that they know aren't working for them. And then also learning things that make you feel like I got some secrets, A big part of it too, the game part, you got to feel like you got some game. When you walk up to somebody that you've got some tricks in your back pocket And I think that's what they have now. And I'm really, really proud to say that.
And
I'm really so cool to hear what you said about your husband, though. Like, that's awesome. I want a caveat on that, though, if you don't mind. Because when I interviewed the 300 women for the book, the number one phrase I heard is, I'm single because I'm too intimidating. And I'm like, maybe that's true 10% of the time. But the other 90% of y'all got some different issues that you're like shrouding in intimidation, you know?
And intimidating is a very nice euphemism sometimes for annoying shit.
Bold, rude, hard to get along with, too giving, too taking. We actually had one of the women in the group quit, and she quit after before phase 1 finished, which phase 1 is no. So she quit at the end of phase no. And her thing, the whole mantra throughout the book was like, I'm too intimidating, I'm too strong, I'm too bold. Whereas really, like, you're kind of too mean.
Yeah.
You know, like, you're kind of too unapproachable. And this is coming not from somebody who's dating you, but somebody who's inviting you into their home and like rolling out the carpet for you. And I still feel like there is this stoicness about you. But so I challenge anybody who takes on the I'm too intimidating excuse to really like ask one other person, you know, just honestly, is there something else that I'm missing here? I think that might like put a lot of light bulbs off.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap up, and as you know, as always, I could talk to you all day long, but I know people have other things to do. If you could believe it, they have other things to do other than listen to us. So obviously tip number 1 is to buy and read your book. And listening to you and having read about it, I think this is really interesting to me, and I can't wait to read about it as somebody who advises other people, not because I'm currently interested in dating anybody else, but certainly for mothers. Because one of the things that I think we've dropped the ball on as parents is actually teaching our kids how to date and how to have relationships, especially in high school. We're so worried about them focusing on schoolwork and sports and activities and getting into a good college and not
getting pregnant
and not doing drugs. And like, we're happy that they're not engaging. But of course, all the data shows that this generation is dating less. People in their 20s are having sex far less frequently than people in previous generations. I was shocked when I saw that. And engaging less in relationships for a lot of other reasons that we don't have time to get into. So that's step 1. Step 2, I think, is to get this workshop book. Yes. Free workbook. Tell people the website again.
It's thegameofdesire.com/workbook.
I love that. So the workbook is number 2. So now give me your 3 other top tips for people who are currently unhappy that they're not in a relationship.
I would say my favorite dating tip is the 2-to-1. So for every 1 question someone asks you, make an effort to ask 2 in return. In talking to people, that is the number 1 complaint, that people just aren't interested in others. They don't ask questions. I think we live in this me culture where I post a picture on Facebook and I wait for people to comment about me, right? I wait for people to engage with me. And so taking an active interest in other people and make that in itself, the 2-to-1, will force you to actually listen, because you know you have to come up with a follow-up question. So if I ask you, like, where'd you get your shirt from? I can't just tune out and be like, okay, now she'd ask me about my shirt next. I have to listen, have another question to follow up with you on. The second thing would probably be take a self-defense class. I think that just gives you that extra bit of confidence, especially in the Me Too culture, to know that you know at least a semblance of something of what to do, so you can protect yourself. And that will just allow you to sit with more confidence when you're meeting and connecting with new people. And then finally, I'd probably say, man, the workbook that you've done, the X's exercise might be a fun one for you. That one I guide people through. I give you the questions to actually ask to ensure that it stays constructive. But that was one that a lot of people who haven't even read the book yet have caught on to and done and gotten some really great value out of.
Yeah, maybe you should try that out first on one of your girlfriends.
Right. Yes, as a practice, I love that.
Because we do, you know, if we think about our friends, I actually have a friend who we broke up because she was very angry with me that she was looking to meet somebody and another mutual friend was looking to meet somebody. And I knew a guy who was single and searching, and I introduced him to the other woman in our friend group. And she was very angry with me and very hurt that I hadn't introduced him to her. And she said to me, what is wrong with me what do you think is wrong with me? Do you think I'm not as pretty as she is? Do you think I'm not as interesting? And I said, no, I just don't think the two of you would be a good fit. You know, you and this other woman are very different. So I think that would be my number one advice to people, number one piece of advice.
She also sounds neurotic a little bit.
Well, a little bit. So my number one piece of advice is to really think about approaching relationship as a good fit. It has to work for both of you.
Yes.
If it doesn't, you have to say, thanks, next.
Thank You Next is Ariana Grande's song. So look at us in pop culture.
As we did that. Anyway, where can people find you in real life other than on the website for your book?
Anywhere, Shan Boody, Booty with a D for my last name, not my anatomy, because I just don't have a butt like that. But find me on this podcast. I've been on 2 other episodes, and I've always love it. I love hanging out in the ladies' room with you. Like, you're my fave. So find me here.
Yay, come back anytime. We love you. Good luck with the book, and I can't wait to read it.
All right, thank you, Donica.
Thank you. Bye.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.